Okay, so now we're going to pick up with Jackie, and she's heading home. Jackie feels really sick. Mom takes her home and puts her to bed. She falls asleep right away and stays in bed for the rest of the day. The next morning, Mom and Dad try to decide if Jackie needs to go see Dr. Boehner. They decide to keep an eye on her for the day. By lunchtime, Jackie's fever is even higher. Mom takes her to Dr. Boehner's office. Dr. Boehner listens to Jackie's lungs. He says, I think it might be strep throat. A nurse does a test, and pretty soon it's confirmed. Jackie has strep throat. Dr. Boehner prescribes antibiotics and sends Jackie home. Jackie stays home for the rest of the week to recover. Miss Phyllis talks with Jackie's mom. Once Jackie's feeling well enough, she starts working on her assignments. They're at home. After about 5 days, Jackie feels a lot better. Her fever's gone. Her mom quits giving her Tylenol. When Monday morning rolls around, Mom wonders if Jackie should go to school. So she pulls out her phone and goes to pioneerchristian.org and goes to the health section and clicks on, should I send my student to school? She follows the flow chart there, and since Jackie's symptoms are gone, and since she's been off painkiller for at least 24 hours, Jackie can go back to school. Okay, let me stop and give an explanation here. Now, of course, the big thing that we're actually looking for here is coronavirus. So in our story, Jackie actually had strep throat, not coronavirus, but in this explanation, I'm going to talk about how exactly we're going to handle all the different kinds of sicknesses. So coronavirus, the big thing we're looking for is coronavirus, and coronavirus is actually a kind of flu. So when a kid has flu-like symptoms, of course, we're going to be suspicious that the kid may have this new coronavirus. So this coming fall and winter are going to be really interesting for parents and staff members, because we're constantly going to have to decide, try to figure out if we ourselves may have coronavirus or if our kids may have coronavirus. It's going to be very interesting to sort of deal with that and to try to decide if we need to get checked out for it or not. So I myself have already gone through one of these. So I developed a really bad cough about a month ago, and I was really concerned that I may have coronavirus, and so I ended up going to an urgent care facility, and I was tested. They stuck the little thing up my nose, and they got a little swab, and they tested me, and it turned out I didn't have coronavirus. My cough was actually coming from a really bad acid reflux, and I think some allergies. And so anyways, it's hard to decide if you should do this or not. And so I think we're going to be up against that challenge quite a bit this coming year. Okay, so let's take a look at how this is going to work. So if a kid does have flu-like symptoms, then here's what the school is supposed to do. We're supposed to instruct parents to keep kids home. And then if a kid does develop flu-like symptoms while at school, we're then supposed to handle the kid the way Jackie was handled here in this story, which was, or in the video 6, which was to isolate her and then call the caregiver and have a caregiver come and take her home. So that's how we're going to plan to handle that. Now, after that, of course, the care is up to each set of caregivers, or each caregiver. And so here's what here's what the school is instructed to tell you, and here are the guidelines that we need to follow here. So if caregivers decide to let a sickness write itself out without going to a doctor, then the school is supposed to tell parents to keep that student at home until the symptoms are entirely gone. For at least 24 hours, or symptoms are entirely gone, and the kid has not taken like Tylenol or any sort of fever or pain reducing medicine for at least 24 hours. And besides that, then we're also supposed to tell parents to not bring their kids to school for 10 days, right? So it'd be 10 days since they left school. They're not supposed to come back. And what that thing is all about is that, so that the idea is that if someone has coronavirus, then, once they have coronavirus, that means they already have had it for a number of days. And then it takes, by the time you start feeling the symptoms, it's going to be about 10 days until you actually are finished with it. And so the idea here is that if you do develop flu-like symptoms, you've got a runny nose, a sore throat, you've got a bad cough, whatever, these different flu-like symptoms, it could be coronavirus. If you never find out, well, then we need to be safe and just have you stay away from school for at least 10 days. Because then by by the end of 10 days, you probably will have gotten over it and will no longer be contagious. Now, if a kid has flu-like symptoms or is feeling bad, then parents can instead parents can instead take the kid to the doctor, and then the doctor can diagnose the kid with something else. Like in our story, Jackie actually had strep throat, and so since she was diagnosed with strep throat, we knew that's not coronavirus, and so she got over her strep throat and came back to school. Now, if kids are taken to the doctor and the doctor does administer a COVID-19 test, and the test comes back negative, then the kid just needs to recover from whatever the illness is and be off of pain meds for at least 24 hours, and then the kid can come back to school. But if a kid does in fact have COVID, then a whole sort of different set of things has to happen. And so what we're going to ask parents to do here is, if a kid does get sent home with flu-like symptoms, we're just going to ask you to tell us as soon as you can if you're going to get the kid tested, or if you're going to take the kid to the doctor, not tested. If you're going to take the kid to the doctor, and if the doctor, if the doctor said that the kid has strep throat or something, or if you've done a test, whatever. We were asking parents to keep the school in the loop so that we can adequately respond to whatever this sickness is. So I know it sounds kind of like a pain, and a lot of these guidelines really are just this I don't know. A lot of these guidelines are just they're fairly difficult to actually follow, but to be able to get all these guidelines fulfilled and to be able to keep the school open, some of this painful stuff sort of needs to be done. So anyway, let's get back to what happens if a kid goes to the doctor and is diagnosed with COVID. So at that point, then what the school needs to do is use our contact tracing logs to figure out who all the kid came into contact with. So if this story, if Jackie actually would have had COVID, then we would have gone back and looked at the records of who all Jackie came into contact with. And if things, since she's in second grade and her cohort will pretty much just stay together, it's basically just going to be her cohort. But we also would know from looking at the medical record that it was Miss Janelle that had dealt with her there, had given her a blanket, taken her temperature and stuff. So we know that Miss Janelle was in contact with her as well. So we'd look back at all of our records and see who came into contact, and then we'd immediately contact every single household that would have been affected with that by that, which would mean every single household that has a student that came into contact with Jackie there at the school. And we want to make sure that they know that their kid possibly could have gotten coronavirus. That's what we're required to do. Okay, now this next part then, excuse me, is a little bit tougher to sort of talk through. Because it's not exactly clear-cut what all will happen. But if a case of COVID actually does hit school, then for sure the cohort that the kid would be with would quit coming to school for like 14 days. So you might wonder, why 14 days, and why could Jackie come back to school after 10 and the rest of the cohort couldn't come back until 14 days have gone? Well, the reason for that is because if Jackie gets sick and she starts showing those symptoms, that means that she already has had COVID for a number of days, 2 to 4 days or so. And so it's going to take her like 10 days and to recover from that and not be contagious anymore. So she already would have been through that whole period of being sick. But if she came to school and she had these symptoms and she began sneezing and coughing and stuff, and other kids came into contact with that, then those kids would have picked it up at that point, probably. And so then they would have to wait later, because COVID takes about 14 days to work its way through somebody's system. So if a kid like Jackie would have COVID, then we would have that cohort not come to school anymore. Now, the thing I'm a little unsure of that I mentioned earlier in the earlier cohort video is that there are connections outside of school all over the place. And so what could possibly happen is, by the time that we've actually thought through who all Jackie came into contact with, and who all Jackie could have come into contact with even outside of school, then possibly the whole school would end up just being shut down, which would mean we would have to transition for 2 weeks to having just like distance learning. And so that's what I'm a little unsure of how exactly that's going to work, because I don't know exactly what the student body is going to be made up of. And so we're going to start the year with the cohorts and basically treat every cohort and every student within the cohorts as if they're not coming into contact with each other outside of school. And then we'll start evaluating that process as school gets rolling, so that we can start making better decisions about that as the school year goes on. Okay. Now, this last thing is there's one more thing that the school is required to do if, in fact, a kid does have COVID there at school, and that is that we're supposed to report that to the Lynn County Health Department. Now, I'll be honest with you. This makes me a little nervous because I'm very much for obeying our government, supporting our government. I am very much pro obeying and supporting government and keeping order in society and so on. But I am a little bit nervous about sharing information with the health department. So I will fulfill these guidelines to the best of my ability, but I have not seen yet what exactly the information is that they're looking for. And I know what they're trying to do is they're trying to make sure that there's not an outbreak at school. I know that's actually what this is all about, and it's nothing nefarious, I believe. But basically, just know if you are a stakeholder at school, if you're someone who's very interested in the school, just know that this is something that the school is required to do. We need to hand over. We just say that, hey, we've got a case here. I'm not sure how much information besides that is going to be required, but we do need to say we had a case here, and here are the contact logs. Here's who the student came into contact with, and so there obviously would be some information there. Now, I'll tell you this is that we are required to do that, but we will definitely not share this information without first telling parents that this, or without making sure that everyone knows ahead of time that this is happening. So. That's about the best that I think, explain that process as of right now. Now, as far as what else the school would need to do if there is a case of COVID, like I said, the cohort wouldn't come to school. Possibly the whole school would need to shut down and transition to distance learning. But a lot of that would actually be worked out in the moment, and it would kind of depend on how many kids have gotten sick, how much COVID is around the entire community, and so a lot of that is going to depend on the instructions we get from the Lynn County Health Department as well. Okay, so I hope that makes a good degree of sense there. It may be helpful actually for you to go look at our communicable diseases plan, which you can see at pioneerchristian.org/health or pioneerchristian.org/COVID-19. You'll see our communicable diseases plan, and there it works through the different stages of how the school will typically respond to COVID being in the community, and then COVID being in the school, and then how the school would come back out of an incident like that when if there actually was COVID in the school. So go check out that document. That might make some of this a little bit more clear. Okay, thank you very much. In the next we're going to be taking a look at Jackie being dismissed from school.